It's one of the oldest and most sought-after shipwrecks on the Great Lakes.
No one has found the Griffin.
Robert LaSalle made a gamble that should have changed North America forever. He built a floating fortress above Niagara Falls, loaded it with a king's ransom and furs, and sent it into waters no European ship had ever tested. The Griffin was meant to be the key to an empire, but it became a crime scene. When it vanished in 1679, it took a fortune and a crew of 6 into the void.
It was a fortune at the time, and he sent it back toward the Niagara River, but it never made the trip. In fact, it vanished without a trace. Crew, cargo, ship, gone.
Now, salvage teams claim they have finally located the wreckage, but what they found on the lakebed is not a triumph. It is a warning. The floating time bomb. The Great Lakes are not just water, they are a graveyard. But among the 6,000 skeletons rusting on the bottom, one ghost story stands above the rest. It is the story of the Griffin, a ship that was never supposed to exist. In 1679, the French explorer Robert LaSalle decided to do the impossible. He wanted to build a massive European-style ship right in the middle of the North American wilderness, above the roaring chaos of Niagara Falls.
He needed a great ship, and he knew he was going to have to build it above the falls.
It was a project so ambitious and so dangerous that many people back in France thought he was insane. But LaSalle did not care. He saw the Great Lakes as a highway to the center of the continent, and he needed a truck to haul the wealth out. So, here is the deal. This was not just a boat. This was a statement. The Griffin was 45 feet long, armed with 7 heavy cannons, and crowned with a carving of a mythical beast, half lion, half eagle. It was a floating fortress designed to intimidate rivals and impress the indigenous nations. The construction alone was a nightmare. They had to drag massive iron spikes, anchors, and cannons through miles of dense forest and mud. It took months of back-breaking labor battling the freezing cold and the constant threat of attack. But when they finally launched it, the blast of the cannon echoed across the water, announcing that France had arrived. But it is not that simple, though. The ship was beautiful, but it was also a target. When the Griffin set sail, it was carrying a cargo that would make your head spin. We are talking about 12,000 pounds of beaver pelts. In the 1600s, this was better than gold. It was a fortune that could pay off all of LaSalle's massive debts and fund his empire for years. The plan was perfect on paper. Sail to Green Bay, load up the furs, send the ship back to Niagara to sell the goods, and bring back supplies. It was supposed to be a simple round trip. But here is the catch. The Great Lakes are treacherous. They are inland seas with their own weather systems, capable of whipping up storms that can snap a modern freighter in half.
They sail off into Lake Michigan, and where does she go? We don't know. That's the mystery.
That's the mystery.
When the Griffin left Washington Island on September 18, 1679, the locals warned the crew. They said the sky looked bad and the winds were turning, but the crew, driven by pressure and greed, pushed off anyway. They sailed into the gray horizon and simply ceased to exist. No one ever saw the ship again. No bodies washed up, no debris was found. It was as if a hole opened up in the lake and swallowed the entire future of the French colony. For 300 years, people have been obsessed with finding this wreck. It is the holy grail of the Great Lakes. Every few years, a team of salvage divers pops up claiming they have found it. They find a timber sticking out of the mud or a shape on the sonar that looks like a 17th century hull. The headlines scream that the mystery is solved. But then the experts come in and the bad news drops. The wood is too young, the bolts are wrong. It is another false alarm. This cycle of hope and failure has driven people crazy. But what if we have been looking for the wrong thing? What if the ship did not sink because of a storm? What if the bad news is not that the ship is lost, but that it was stolen? The real danger was not the water, it was the man steering the wheel. The traitor at the helm. This is where things get really dark. Everyone loves to blame the weather because it is an easy answer. A storm hits, the ship goes down, end of story. But LaSalle himself did not buy it. He suspected something much worse. He believed his own men betrayed him. And when you look at the details, it is hard to argue with him. The man in charge of the Griffin was a pilot known only as Luke. We do not know his last name, his history, or where he came from. He is a ghost in the records. And usually when someone in history has no paper trail, it means they are hiding something. LaSalle wrote letters after the disappearance, and he was furious. He did not write, "I know they sank it." He wrote, "I believe." He thought the pilot and the crew of 5 mutinied. Think about it. You are on a boat with a fortune in furs that could set you up for life. Your boss is miles away exploring the land. The weather is getting rough, giving you the perfect cover story. If the ship just disappears, who is going to know if you actually sold the cargo and burned the evidence? It is a theory that makes a lot of sense. The fur trade was cutthroat. Rivals would pay good money to see LaSalle fail. And get this, there were rumors floating around for years after the disappearance. Traders claimed they saw members of the Griffin crew living it up in distant villages, selling French goods that they should not have had.
The dudes that were supposed to take the Griffin and all of his hides down to Niagara maybe ditched the Griffin in order to go steal his hides and sell them.
Some people even said they saw the pilot working for rival merchants. It is the kind of conspiracy that sounds like a movie plot, but back then it was just business. The pilot, Luke, was constantly arguing with LaSalle before the ship even launched. He was difficult, insubordinate, and shady. LaSalle had to rely on him because he was the only one who knew how to navigate these waters, but the trust was never there. When the ship sailed away from Green Bay, the crew was already on edge. They were alone on a massive lake, carrying a heavy cargo with a leader they did not respect. It is the perfect recipe for a mutiny. Everyone is obsessed with the idea of a heroic struggle against the elements. We want to picture the brave sailors fighting the waves until the bitter end. But the reality might be much uglier. They might have just run the ship aground on purpose, unloaded the furs into canoes, and set the Griffin on fire to hide their tracks. If that is true, then the wreck everyone is looking for does not exist. Or at least it does not look like a ship anymore. It would just be a pile of burned wood and iron scattered in the shallows. This theory changes everything. It means the search teams scanning the deep water are wasting their time. It means the bad news for historians is that the hero of the story was actually a villain. And it means that the first great maritime mystery of North America was actually the first great heist. But the pilot was not the only one with a motive. There were other powerful forces watching from the shore, waiting for the ship to fail.
My thoughts are this. So this is the first ship of its kind in the Northern Great Lakes. So the native tribes had never seen anything like this. And I would imagine if this thing was within sight of land, there was people watching it. This was a big deal.
He was about to make a decision that would doom them all. Burn it to the ground. Yeah, about that, it wasn't just the crew LaSalle had to worry about. He had made a lot of enemies. The fur trade was not a friendly game of commerce. It was a war. The merchants in Montreal hated LaSalle. He had a monopoly, a royal permission slip that let him bypass them and trade directly with the tribes in the West. Every pelt he loaded onto the Griffin was money taken out of their pockets. They were desperate to stop him. They sent letters to the king accusing LaSalle of incompetence and recklessness. They wanted him to fail so badly that sabotage was definitely on the table. But the threats were not just coming from fellow Frenchmen. The Jesuit missionaries were also watching closely. They saw LaSalle as a disruptor. His commercial ambitions threatened the fragile peace they had built with the indigenous nations. They warned that his big ship and his loud cannons would scare the tribes and start a war, and they might have been right. The Iroquois Confederacy was powerful, and they were suspicious of this floating fortress. Basically, there was a target on the Griffin's back from day one. There is actually a record of a plot to burn the ship before it was even finished. One night during construction, a worker woke up just in time to stop an arsonist who was about to torch the hull. LaSalle had to launch the ship early just to keep it safe. That tells you everything you need to know. People were actively trying to destroy this vessel. So, when the ship vanished, the list of suspects was long. Did a rival trader pay the crew to scuttle it? Did a group of indigenous warriors board the ship and destroy it to protect their waters? Or did the Jesuits encourage the locals to get rid of this threat to the mission? The silence after the disappearance suggests a cover-up. Usually, if a ship sinks in a storm, something washes up. A barrel, a plank, a hat. But for months, there was nothing. That kind of clean disappearance feels deliberate, and that is putting it lightly. The rumors were wild. Some said the local tribes captured the crew and burned the ship. Others said the crew joined the tribes. The lack of concrete evidence allowed these stories to grow. But one thing is certain. There were plenty of people on the shore who breathed a sigh of relief when the Griffin never came back. To them, the bad news would have been the ship's safe return. Its destruction was exactly what they wanted. This brings us back to the modern search. If the ship was sabotaged and burned near the shore, the wreckage would be totally different from a ship that sank in deep water. It would be scattered, charred, and hidden under centuries of sand. That makes finding it almost impossible. But that hasn't stopped people from trying. In fact, the hunger to find this ship has led to some major embarrassments. The locals warned them, but the crew was too greedy to listen. The wrong shipwreck. Here's the crazy part. Because the Griffin is such a legend, people see what they want to see. This is where the bad news for modern divers comes in. Every few years, someone announces they have found it. The media goes wild, documentaries are filmed, and then science ruins the party. Take the discovery near Tobermory, Ontario. A team found a massive timber that looked exactly like the keel of a 17th century ship. It had wooden pegs, no metal bolts, just like the ships of LaSalle's time. The lead hunter was convinced. He spent years fighting in court for the rights to the wreck. He was sure he had solved the mystery. But then the carbon dating results came back. The wood was from the 1800s. It wasn't the Griffin. It was likely just an old fishing net stake or a piece of a much later schooner. Then there was the discovery off Washington Island. This was the big one. Sonar picked up a shape that looked perfect.
A salvage company here in Washington says it has found a famous ship.
Divers went down and found wood and iron. The location matched the pilot's last known coordinates. Everyone held their breath. But here's the catch. The Great Lakes are covered in invasive mussels. These tiny shells cover everything in a thick, rock-hard layer. You can't see the wood. You can't see the details. You are basically looking at a fuzzy lump on the bottom. When they finally managed to analyze the samples, it was another letdown. The wood was too young. The iron bolts were the wrong shape. It was another false alarm. The problem is that the Great Lakes are full of wrecks. There are thousands of ships down there. Finding a specific wooden boat from 300 years ago is like finding a needle in a haystack, and the haystack is made of other needles. It is heartbreaking for the families and the explorers who pour their life savings into these searches. They want to be the ones to rewrite history, but the lake keeps tricking them. The cold, fresh water preserves wood perfectly, so a ship from 1850 can look just as old as a ship from 1679 to the untrained eye. Without a cannon with a French crest or a specific artifact, it is all just guessing. And get this, the legal battles are insane. As soon as anyone claims to find the Griffin, the government of France, the state of Michigan, and the U.S. federal government all start fighting over who owns it. It becomes a nightmare of paperwork before the ship is even confirmed. This discourages people from sharing their data. It makes the whole search secretive and toxic. The bad news is that even if someone finds it, we might never know because they are too afraid to tell anyone. So do you think the pilot stole the fortune, or is the ship still waiting down there in the dark? It is a billion-dollar question with no answer. If you want more mysteries like this, smash that like button and subscribe. You won't believe what we find next.